Former President Donald Trump scored a major legal victory after the judge overseeing the government's classified documents case postponed the trial indefinitely. Critics are slamming the decision, accusing the judge of roadblocking federal prosecutor Jack Smith's case against Trump. But Trump's New York trial is still front and center after Stormy Daniels took the stand, detailing her relationship with Trump and what took place in that hotel room almost 20 years ago. With weeks to go in the trial, it is up to the jury to decide if Trump will be the first convicted felon possibly elected to the highest office in the United States. Joining me now is The Hill's Julia Manchester. Julia, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Margaret.
Neither of Donald Trump's big federal trials will be completed before Election Day. How do these tie into his Supreme Court claim of absolute immunity, and what would it mean if he is elected?
Well, look, we have seen former President Trump use this strategy of trying to delay these cases. So delay them until, possibly until he is elected president. And if he's immune from these cases, if he's president of the United States once again, theoretically, according to his argument and his legal team's argument, he'll have criminal immunity from these cases. So it could be seen as a way to essentially shield him and delay these cases. But at the same time, he still has this hush money trial happening in New York right now. Now, that trial is seen as the weakest, I think, legally, according to a number of experts for the, for the prosecution and, out of all of these cases. But still, I mean, that is the one trial that is essentially guaranteed to wrap up before Election Day. So we'll be watching that. But for these other trials, it's absolutely seen as a win because this is what the Trump team has been trying to do, delay.
You talked about this New York case. How much more important is it becoming for his personal and political fate?
It's obviously very important. It has to do with, many ways his reputation. For example, yesterday we heard some really salacious testimony from Stormy Daniels about her alleged sexual encounter with former President Trump. She went into, very, very, great detail. But in terms of his political fate, look, we've seen Donald Trump be the center of salacious stories in the past. You just have to think back to October of 2016 when the Access Hollywood tape came out from the early 2000s. And essentially it had audio of the former president or then regular citizen Donald Trump, then businessman Donald Trump, talking about groping women and sexually, bragging about it. So that didn't really seem to have an impact on his election chances. So it's, kind of hard to see how something like this could impact his electoral chances.
Explicit details from Stormy Daniels came out in court. Now, Trump has been involved in so many controversies, as you've mentioned, in his time in politics. And in Indiana's GOP primary this week, Nikki Haley received 128,000 votes, months after ending her campaign. Is this a sign that the trial is taking a toll on voters?
I don't think it's necessarily a sign that it's taking a toll on voters. We've seen that in other states, going back to even, New Hampshire and South Carolina before these trials took place. Nikki Haley was still getting, a decent number of votes, not a leading number. She didn't get the majority among GOP primary voters, but she certainly has a base. I think this is more of a sign of Trump's general weakness, among some more moderate Republicans or maybe some, Republicans that are simply anti-Trump, but maybe conservative. So, that spells a different warning sign. And that's an issue that Trump has had predating these trials.
Julia, turning to the Middle East and what's happening there, Biden continues to face heavy scrutiny over his support of Israel as a round of Israeli bombing took place in Rafah overnight. Now, the Washington Post reports the Biden administration is halting the shipment of certain bombs to Israel. How significant is this as a policy move?
It's, incredibly significant. I think we're seeing the Biden administration try to walk this fine line between supporting Israel, but at the same time acknowledging what many critics say is, maybe an overplaying of Israel's hand, that has resulted in thousands of civilians' death, Palestinian civilian death. And we've seen the White House very much come under fire because of that. So it's continuing to try to walk this fine line, but at the same time, it continues to get this criticism because ultimately we know the Biden administration is still backing Israel. There just might be some of these, maybe slight restrictions or maybe somewhat of a backing away from, the tougher stance that Israel is taking.
Here in Washington, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene is shying away from her request to remove Speaker Johnson as it seems clear the vote would fail. What are you hearing happening behind closed doors as Greene meets with Johnson? And GOP members have a new warning for Johnson, correct?
Yeah, so a lot of this has to do with former President Trump. Former President Trump has backed Johnson. And we know that Marjorie Taylor Greene is in the same camp of the Republican Party as former President Trump. So this is all about, or somewhat about, getting in line with former President Trump. He's playing a role. We've heard reports that he's very much gotten involved in some of these negotiations, and sort of playing a mediator of some sorts between these two. But, at the same time, Johnson is facing some pressure from GOP lawmakers to really keep the band together here. I mean, Republicans are facing a very uphill climb going into November. They have a very narrow majority at this point. So any sort of splintering within the conference is going to, spell trouble for them going into an election year that's already going to be difficult as it is.
Julia, and over in the Senate, the deadline for an FAA reauthorization bill is Friday at midnight, and it remains in question what will get done. Now, Senator Ted Cruz, the Republican floor manager for the bill, is playing an unusual role as a deal maker as he tries to get it passed through the Senate. Now, normally he serves as a critic of leadership. What's Cruz really trying to do here?
I think right now Cruz is just simply trying to get this through as quickly as possible. He doesn't want a short-term deal. He wants this, through. And we know that a number of members have proposed their own amendments, Republicans and Democrats, and that could, slow walk this. So this is Cruz trying to fast track this and get this done as quickly as possible ahead of this deadline.
A top Biden administration bank regulator is under fire due to a report that found a toxic work culture at his agency, including rampant sexual harassment. So far, Democrats are standing behind FDIC Chair Martin Gruenberg. But how sustainable is that given this damning report from the independent investigators?
It's damning, and we'll see how the administration plans to handle this. But, they're in hot water over this. So this is going to be something they have to keep an eye on. Now, do I think this is going to blow up into a major story that we're all watching? We don't know yet. It's not a top story yet. But it's something that I think the administration is certainly going to have to deal with and address.
All right, we'll be watching. Thank you, Julia, for joining us.
Thank you.
Rudy Giuliani is having a tough time finding help in his bankruptcy case. Lawyers for Trump's former right-hand man filed documents in court saying Giuliani may have to do accounting duties on his own. He is claiming to have reached out to a number of accounting firms. However, no one seems interested in taking the assignment. The New York Times reports Giuliani cannot commit to the $43,000 a month budget agreed to in bankruptcy court, instead spending nearly $120,000 in January alone. The former mayor of New York filed for bankruptcy in December, days after a jury ordered a $148 million judgment to two Georgia election workers who Giuliani falsely accused of committing election fraud in 2020. And Giuliani's legal woes aren't over. He is also facing RICO charges in Georgia, the same legal act he famously used as a prosecutor in New York to crack down on the mob. Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis says she will not testify before a GOP-led state Senate panel that's currently investigating her. Willis is leading the election interference case against former President Donald Trump in Georgia, but not without controversy. Willis has had a romantic relationship with the special prosecutor she hired for the case, Nathan Wade. That state Senate panel is looking into whether Willis used taxpayer dollars during her relationship with Wade. Willis is questioning the panel's authority to subpoena her and said she will not appear and that she had not broken the law. In March, a judge said that Willis could continue her case if she or Wade stepped down, which Wade later did. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Margaret Chadbourn. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.